Let's see what this is gonna look like. Let me set this down. How much?
All right, everybody, welcome back. What we're watching, episode 15. It's been a hot minute. Actually, now it's been a cold minute. It has been a while since we last did this, but that's okay. I mean, it's anticipation, and what they say is that life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And we made other plans, and life happened, but that's okay. It's one of those things where you can pick it back up sometimes later. But I'm joined as always by my co-host TJ. How are you, sir?
Doing well, and actually thinking about the fact since we did this last, a lot of stuff has happened. Like a lot of stuff, not just a
Hmm.
little stuff. A lot of stuff. So not a hot minute, but a ice age minute. It's been a little bit. It's been a little bit.
But if you're following along and you're doing that, and you just discovered us and making your way through the episodes, you haven't missed any time at all. That's what's
What are
good
you
about that.
talking about? What are you talking about? A psychiatrist? No.
No,
Uh-huh.
that will always crack me up. That will
That's what you
always
get
crack me up.
here. That's what you get here on what you're watching. Livia.
But we're going to pick up where we left off. We made it to season 5, and we're up to Where's Johnny, the third episode of season 5 of the HBO original series, The Sopranos, the 55th overall episode of the series, written by Michael Kaleo. Here's how I'm going to pronounce it. Directed by John Patterson. Originally aired on March the 21st, 2004. And we're picking it up with some of the people you remember. We had left it off. Some of the associates had gotten out of prison. So we're going to pick it up. Feach and Tony B confront a local gardener, Sal Vitro, who's been cutting grass in a particular neighborhood for decades. Feach claims that his nephew, E. Gary Lamanna, reserves the right to this area. When Sal acts dismissive, Feach breaks his arm before Tony B, horrified, pulls Feach away. Paulie learns from his aunt, one of Sal's customers, that he will not be gardening the area anymore because of the assault. Meanwhile, Junior finds Curb Your Enthusiasm on TV and, in his dementia, confuses the characters with himself and Bobby and thinks it's his trial. All right, now there's a couple of things we're going to unpack here. All right,
A lot.
this poor gardener, Sal. I'm like, I see him now. Anything I'll ever see this guy on, he will be Sal the gardener, and I will feel horrible for him. Because regardless of what else is happening in this guy's life, what he has or has not done, in this instance, every single time you come across him in these episodes, he is just simply doing his job. He doesn't want any, he doesn't want any, no trouble. He is just all that. And so let's say you're at your job, whatever your job is. You're cutting grass. You are a mower and you are the best at it. And
Right.
this guy comes up and said, "Nope, my boy is going to do this from now on. His nephew." I'd be dismissive too. Get out of here. I got, because him, he's got 3 other lawns that he's got to get to, and he wants to get home still at a reasonable time. And
Right.
if you leave him alone, he can do his job, he can do it wonderfully, and still be home in a reasonable time. And this guy all of a sudden comes up to you, you've never seen him before, and tells you his nephew is going to be taking over. I'd be dismissive too. I mean, like, man, go on somewhere. Not expecting him to just go off on me and break my arm.
And that's the thing. It's like, obviously, we find out a little bit later why Sal Vitro is such a hard worker because of his son. Like, he's putting his son through college,
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, you're just a worker. You're just doing your job. And I'm assuming that, if lawn care is the route that you go, I'm assuming you have some enjoyment out of, doing lawn care. So you're there, you're doing your job. You've been doing it for decades. Some dude that looks like the coach from Unnecessary Roughness comes up to you and says, this is my nephew's, route. Yeah, I'm gonna, and that's the thing that gets me too. It's just like it's not even just Feach. It's a lot of the guys in the family. I'm not gonna call them wise guys. A lot of guys in the family. It's like you say something contradictory to what they believe. Oh, you're smart mouthing me, huh? Like they're ready to go from
Right.
0 to 1,000, ready to go off bat. And look, we see the ramifications because Paulie does the exact same thing later on.
Right. And it's never like my nephew's going to be doing this. Excuse me? No, I'm doing these. Oh, you think so? There's a disagreement here. Let's sit down and discuss this. It is
Yeah.
never that. It is never that.
Discussion doesn't
And
come into play unless you're asking for permission from a boss, like you're asking Tony to give a blessing or something like that. If you're dealing with a civilian, your word is that's it. So I'm a jerk off, and then it's just that was my best speech. So I'm a jerk off, like.
and Sal is like, I don't deserve this.
No.
So he's like, I'm no longer doing any of these lawns. Your nephew wants it. Your nephew's got it.
So we will say when we're closer to the end, I really will want to show some love to a character that I feel like honestly got crapped on more than anyone else. Sal Vitro.
Oh, 100%, 100%. At the same time, then we've seen little glimpses of it, but now it's one of those things. Now I feel like it's the red light shining on us. Junior and his dementia. I believe it says they were watching Curb. I believe it's a scene with Larry David and Jeff Garland, and he
Jeff
thinks it's
Garland.
him. He thinks it's him and Bobby.
Which
And
they look a lot alike. All
right,
like,
yeah, I could see. You could definitely see it. That if you're not, if all of your faculties are no longer there, I could definitely see it. And if you put yourself in Junior's place, why are they showing? Why are they showing this on the TV? And all of that. And so, something definitely to keep an eye on there. Tensions rise in New York as loan shark Lorraine Caluso and her boyfriend Jason Evanina collect debts. They are attacked by three competitors, including Phil and Joey Peeps, for giving their collections to little Carmine instead of Johnny. Phil stages a mock execution with Lorraine, threatening that next time there'll be no next time. Lorraine, Jason, and Angelo meet Tony and Junior at Harold Melvin's office to discuss the problem. Tony recommends that New York form a triumvirate of bosses with Johnny, Carmine, and Angelo. Angelo says that he doesn't need the stress since he's semi-retired and wants to enjoy his grandchildren. Meanwhile, Paulie visits Feach's bakery and confronts him about assaulting Sal. Feach becomes irate with Paulie and demands that he leave.
So starting out with all right, so Lorraine, and I realized what I did with Feet saying he looks like a coach from Unnecessary Roughness. You got Lorraine looking like a lead detective from a show called New York Undercover. But I like how they introduce her character. We hadn't seen up until this point a woman in the family, right?
Right.
Like every other woman is either a spouse, a gumar, or a daughter. Like you aren't in the family holding down business. So for her to do what she does, and then obviously we get, a little information with regards to Carmine's fond of her. Like, but are they cousins? I don't know. Like that's a whole nother thing that we find out later. But still, she introduces her boyfriend. Hey, this is the love of my life. And then the mock execution. And I'm like, I would have peed a little bit. Like you heard the gunshot go off, so for all intents and purposes, you think, hey, I should be dead right now. It got
Right.
to what? The P's or the R's?
I can't remember, but
Right.
one of
But I
those,
mean,
yeah.
but one of those, right? Like that's more than halfway through the album. Maybe they could have been close. So Phil was wrong for that. But now again, we're seeing because Carmine Lupertazzi is now gone.
Right.
Because he smelled burning hair. Now we're seeing this powder keg going on in New York between Lil Carmine and Johnny Sack. And Johnny Sack, who has been a fairly even-keeled person up until this point, is showing what he's capable of.
Right.
But and again, it's not him as much as it is his purview saying, all right, Phil, go do what needs to be done. Get my money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then you're talking about when we talked about Feach and Sal, like, hey, no, my nephew's supposed to be doing this. Let's sit down and discuss it. The two people now who are definitely not going to sit down and discuss anything, Paulie and Feach. That's just a powder keg there.
They are the same person.
Right.
They really are the same person because I like when Feach gets excited because he's just yelling like this. And like, you're entitled to Ugats. I did not know what Ugats was. And if I've said something in another language, educate me on it, folks. Leave it in the comments. Let me know. But like just the way that they communicate with one another. And I knew it was going to be a problem. People don't usually match Paulie's intensity.
Right.
Until Feach.
Yeah.
Feach will not be bullied. That's not going to happen. He went to jail. He served his time. And he hit the ground running as soon as he got out. You are not going to tell me when I can and cannot make money. Won't happen.
Right. So now we get a very interesting set of scenes that really sets up a lot of the rest of the series. Tony tries to mend fences with Artie, who's still holding a grudge over the loan incident. He offers Artie one of the bedrooms in his mother's house since Artie has run into problems with his living arrangements. Artie reluctantly agrees. During Sunday dinner, Junior repeats the comment that Tony never had the makings of a varsity athlete.
He never had the makings of a varsity athlete. Tony gets so pissed. Don't say it again. Don't say it again.
Don't say it again. Don't say it again, because that's not the first time they've ever had that conversation. That's not even the fifth time they've never had that conversation.
The way that Junior did it, it's as if he was purposely trying to, get Tony's goose. But clearly, I mean, again, we talked about it. The dementia's coming through the experience with Curb. But Tony, being the man that he is, he's around the table. It's degrading, and we're not going to talk about it again. End of story. End of discussion. And then, somebody comes over. He never had the makings of a varsity athlete. He immediately brings it back. It's like, oh no, man. So yeah, it's family.
Right.
It's family, and because I feel like if it were anybody else, we're not seeing Tony show restraint. But yeah, he's doing. He had to do a phenomenal job up until that last time, and then he's like, "Yeah, you're not welcome here anymore."
Because it's one of those things, and I think even if Junior didn't have the dementia starting to show, it's one of those things that you always like and I've got those things. I've got those buttons that certain people know they can push, and you've just got to get away from it. Like, all right, they know that they're getting it, because Livia used to do that. And then Tony's like, don't, because you remember, she's dead to me. No, her that she's dead to me, and just he would, because they know that they can just keep pushing those. But he never had the makings of a varsity athlete.
I like to see that, because obviously everything that we see with Tony in his day-to-day makes its way through osmosis to his therapy sessions with Dr. Milfy.
Right.
So talking to Dr. Milfy, he did it again, or he said it again, and I don't understand why he does this, or and it's and I'm essentially I'm ready to talk more Dr. Milfy because the psychiatry of it all, the mental health of it all, with Tony is very interesting.
Tony takes offense, reminding Junior that those comments made him feel like how they made him feel when they were said in front of female cousins and warning him not to make the comment again. When Barbara arrives with her family, she asks her brother about NFL season tickets. Their discussion of a possible draft pick leads Junior to make the comment again.
He never had the makings of a varsity athlete.
Right. Furious, Tony storms out of the dinner with AJ. Paulie's aunt tells him that Sal is tending her lawn for the last time. Tony meets Johnny at Shea Stadium parking lot, telling him that Lorraine reached out to him. It's revealed that Tony and Lorraine previously had an affair. Tony raises his power sharing idea from the previous meeting, but Johnny responds with contempt, accusing Tony of empowering little Carmine when he reached out to him for help during Tony's disagreement with Carmine over the HUD scam. Meanwhile, Junior wanders from his house in his bathrobe and drives to Bloomfield Avenue in Newark's North Ward to where his brother Johnny Boy once had a Soprano family hangout. Junior finds that the hangout is now a storefront church and is kicked out. Befuddled, Junior forgets where his car is and walks in the opposite direction. Janice and Bobby argue about what to do when they find out Junior is missing.
So here we see Janice, again, using family when it's convenient for her, right? Because she's quick to tell Tony what he should or should not be doing with regards to Olivia, with regards to Junior. And she's a mother now. So, she's stepmom at this point. So it's like, I'm too tired. Like it took her time to get there. And Bobby says it. It seems like I love him more than you do. You Sopranos. So he gets that in every once in a while. I mean, you Sopranos, man. Like it's tough, but I feel for Bobby, man.
Right.
I feel for Bobby. It's like you as a man, you want more responsibility. You want to do more so that you can make more money. But here you are with this albatross, which is Junior Soprano. Anything goes down with him, it's on you. And yeah, it's tough.
Very, very tough. Paulie pays a visit to Gary and asks him to give back his area to Sal. When Gary refuses, Paul hits his brother Jimmy in the head with a shovel, causing Gary to fall out of the tree he was trimming. Paulie threatens and robs Gary, takes his lawnmower as a down payment, and demands that Gary pay Sal's medical bills and let him take it out and let him take a cut of Gary's profits. Not a great day for Gary. Your brother gets hit, you fall out of the tree.
Like that whole experience was like, because again, you can't be a civilian and tough talk Paulie, walnuts, or Feats Lamana. It's not going to go well for you. So they tough talk him. They're like, who the hell are you? Get the hell out of here. Something to that effect. Paulie puts his like, I can't do the thing that he doesn't. He puts his hands up.
Yeah. Yep.
He walks away. And you're like, okay, this is over. No. Grabs a shovel and kick. Old boy's laid out. Gary falls out of the tree and still gets kicked a couple times and loses what looks like a brand new lawnmower. So it's just like, and then Paulie trying to shut his truck. Did he think that the truck was going to stay closed? Because he pushed it down and it seemed like he was frustrated, so he did it again. So yeah, that was tough.
And then Tony goes back to playing an old favorite. When Bobby informs Tony that Junior is missing, Tony replies that he doesn't care and Junior is dead to him. Later, Tony and Christopher have a sit down with Johnny. When Chris butts into their argument, Johnny shouts at them and leaves. Afterwards, Tony lashes out at Chris, advising that he keep his ears open and mouth shut in order to avoid getting drawn into a brewing war in New York. Adriana is told that she could be forced to act as an FBI informant for as long as 7 years. Meanwhile, Junior sits on a park bench and is accosted by a homeless woman. Later, Junior is discovered by 2 Newark police officers as he's walking across the Clay Street Bridge and subsequently trips over and cuts his knee when he tries to flee. After Junior is driven home, Janice and Bobby tell Tony about the situation, but Tony believes Janice is merely trying to dump her problems on the hen, mentioning her prior drug habits and wild lifestyle. When Janice slaps Tony, he starts choking her. As Bobby and Artie try to break up the fight, Artie gets hit in the eye by Janice's flailing elbow. Janice runs out of the house crying. Tony tells Bobby that if he wants more responsibility in the family, he should start by controlling his wife. Control your wife. Later, Tony mediates a sit-down between Paulie and Feach at Satriella's, where it is ruled that Sal and Gary divide the contentious neighborhood in half. Sal is disappointed, but Paulie insists he should be grateful for getting this much. He then asks that Sal will have to provide free services at the homes of some friends of ours, including Tony and Johnny's lawns. Poor Sal. Again, you had all of this area. You get beat up. You're like, all right, you have it all. Then they come at him, and all right, you get half of it. Well, I had all of it before any of this happened. You should be lucky. And by the way, you got to do all these for free.
And I want a cut of your, profits going forward. And so that's why, again, the guy, he was prepared to get out of the business. Like the friend of the aunt goes to Paulie. Oh, the poor man's not going to be able to do lawns anymore. He took his son out of school. He's getting out of the business. And then Paulie's like, nah, that's not happening. So you're going to keep doing this. You're getting half of the territory, but I also want 5 to 10% off the top. The part that got me, that was to me very interesting of what you just laid out, was that meet between Christopher, Tony, and Johnny Sack. Tony told him, Christopher, before they got there,
right?
Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Now granted, he later tells them we benefit from the confusion, but before then, don't say anything. Just sit back, keep your mouth shut and your ears open. And then you have Christopher, and it was a very benign statement.
Right.
It's too bad y'all can't come to terms. That's it. Something simple. And then Johnny, didn't you used to drive? It's like, why do you even have an opinion? Some people need to go back to what they were doing and like Johnny really gets irate in this moment, and again, it was a very benign statement, but it's with everything going on, man. I mean, it's like everything is just it's a tinderbox. Mm-hmm. Everything is just, we're adding gasoline, we're adding kerosene, we're adding propane, we're adding hydrogen, whatever is flammable. We're just adding more and more and more of it, and it's only a matter of time before it blows.
Absolutely. After running into Junior's neurologist on the golf course, Tony realizes that Junior's insults may have been due to his infarcts, a possible side effect from the boom mic incident at the courthouse earlier. Tony visits Junior to reconcile and recommends that he take his medication to help with his memory loss. Junior reveals that Feach complained to him about the ruling against Gary. Tony is upset about Feach going behind his back, but Junior reminds him that he is still the official boss of the family, despite arrangements. Tony asks why he always repeats mean things and not something nice. When Tony asks Junior if he loves him, Junior doesn't answer, and they both quietly tear up.
So, if I'm watching this for the first time, even with the first watch, you can see that they had to have a relationship prior to everything that happened. But here's the realization that we have. season 5, episode 3.
Right.
This man tried to kill you a couple years ago.
Yep.
You're taking care of him now. He tried to kill you a couple years ago. So that question, do you love me, is so loaded. Because it's like, if he says yes, what does that mean? I love you, but I tried to kill you by having a couple of black guys rob you. And not only that, I was being puppeteered by your mother.
Right.
So it's like, that is just, so I can understand why both of them would be teared up, because it's like, Junior never had kids. Tony was the closest thing to a son Junior had.
Yep.
And they even make reference to that. They played catch, all of that stuff.
Yep.
Tony loved his father and would continue to make excuses for his father till the cows came home, but he often speaks fondly of Junior, even after Junior tried to have him killed. So it's just like, that question is so heavy, because what is love to a person that you've tried? What does it mean to say I love you to a person you tried to kill? That's tough.
Absolutely. And I was thinking of that too. You see the flashbacks to Tony and Junior when both were younger, and he's asking them, hey, did you hear the ball game last night? No, I had to go to bed. They played catch and all of that. But you also still get the information that even when Tony was growing up, Junior had to remind him, you never had the makings of a varsity athlete. And that's not the first time. They say it's not the first time. Like when you would say that around the cousins, how did that make me feel? But it's like the song. I don't want to get too maudlin here, but it is like the song. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me no more. They have affection for each other. You can tell, but still, there's certain things. And when you have family members like that, they always go, what? I was playing around, or I'm just telling the truth. How could you get mad at me for I'm telling the truth,
But that happens, and it doesn't make it okay. So folks, if you're watching this and you've got people who disguise disrespect and humor, the only way that they're going to stop is if you let them know how you feel about it. All right, because but you have to do it effectively. And what Tony is doing is it's insults back at one another. They're hurling insults back at one another. It's not effective communication. It's only going to piss someone else off, which is going to make them want to come back again and do something else. So it's crazy to think, again, Tony is in therapy, but where's the benefit coming in at?
Right.
She's helping him be an amazing boss, because we oftentimes hear him, again, we talked about this before, he regurgitates information that when it comes from a source that he deems as credible.
Right.
He'll spit it verbatim, so it's just, I don't know. It stinks. And to see them tear up, because what their relationship could have been had they not been in the lifestyle that they are in. You know what I mean?
Right. So let's go into All Happy Families, the 4th episode of season 5, 56th overall episode of the series, written by Tony Kalim and directed by Rodrigo Garcia, originally aired on March 28, 2004. In New York, Lorraine and Jason are murdered by Joey and Billy Leotardo after they refuse to give their collections to Johnny. Little Carmine is shocked by the news, but is advised by fellow capo Rusty Emilio to take aggressive action and defeat Johnny. Meanwhile, Tony advises his crew not to get involved in the New York feud. Feach comes to the meeting and regales the younger mobsters with stories from his mob career, including one when Tony and Jackie Sr. made their first major move by robbing his card game, the infamous card game.
The card game.
Tony
so
laughs
much
at
comes
this.
from that.
Right. Tony laughs at this, but Feach asks if he can run the game once again. Tony considers the offer since it's now run by his Uncle Junior's crew, and allows Feach to supervise it and get 20% of its profits. When Feach leaves, Sylvia warns Tony that Feach is a notorious egomaniac. I feel like that's one of those things where Tony is like, you think? Really?
Right.
AJ has a difficult time in school and disrespects Carmela. Tony and Carmela visits AJ's guidance counselor, Robert Wegler, who advises AJ to improve his SAT scores and to do better with classwork. Upon learning he was once almost diagnosed with ADD, AJ suggests that he could use the learning disability angle and get unlimited time on his SATs and enter college. Wegler goes over AJ's academic record, which Carmela partly blames on her separation from Tony. After they leave the office, the secretary informs Wegler that 2 students were involved in a deadly car accident. AJ overhears the news. Tony decides to buy AJ a new Nissan Xterra as a motivational tool to get better grades, saying that Carmela will keep the keys until his grades improve. Later, in an argument with Tony, Carmela points out that he doesn't have many friends, just flunkies, who would laugh at his jokes only because he's the boss and they fear him. A lot to unpack.
So much to unpack, and I'm going to hit it out of order only because that what you just mentioned says so much about the show, right? Carmela is not stupid. She called it like it was. You got flunkies. They're going to laugh. They're pretending to be your friends. They don't care about you. So when we get to that scene later, and Tony is now realizing that it makes that scene so much more powerful because we get the resurrection of a name we haven't heard in quite some time, Richie Aprile.
Richie Aprile.
Those old school guys that go away and they come back expecting things to be the way they were, and that's what Feach does. A lot of times when Tony would talk to Feach, well, in my day, no, this ain't your day.
Right.
You can stop with that old school crap. This is it. I'm the boss. And then, well, Godfather, stop with the Godfather crap. Like Tony is like, he's past fed up with Feach, like past fed up. And whenever he takes the time to realize it, he's like, you know what? Let me look back on it. Everybody in the room is laughing, except for Feach.
Except for Feach.
And that's when something's got to be done, because because everybody is laughing, they're not going to come after. There's no way that they're coming after. Feach wasn't laughing. Feach isn't scared of Tony.
Right.
And that's what it is. But I hate to go out of turn on that one. But again, so much to unpack from that first portion, because again, we're talking AJ getting that news from Wegler, and obviously Tony being threatened by any, man that would smile at his wife, calls Wegler, possibly a homosexual, makes a joke about him being gay. But AJ getting that news, like, oh, I didn't know that. And then they were like, well, hey, AJ, how about you go to class? And what does he do? He goes and he stands and he talks to his friends, because that's what he wants to do. And now everybody is so distraught by these kids dying, which makes sense because young loss is horrible. But the response is, I'm going to buy him a car. And when if no one has ever gone, if the person watching this has never gone through a separation, it's usually not easy. When there are kids involved, there's a power struggle because both parents want to be loved by that child. So if Carmela, and we've seen this, is coming off as the heavy, Tony is that, he's the happy-go-lucky man coming in with the gifts and the ball games and the drum sets and stuff like that. It makes Carmela look heavy, but he uses it. I'm going to use this as a motivational tool. Here, you can drive this one time, and then it's going to sit in the driveway until you get your grades up. And he even then in that moment, he smarts off to Carmela. So Tony's like, no, you might want to check that because she's holding these keys.
She's got the keys, right?
So I
Right.
mean, again, motivationally, it makes sense, but there was no conversation going into it.
Right. But I thought about it as I was watching this scene, although it's immediately been a while since I've seen this episode. AJ is not his father's son. He is both of his parents' child because they both do the same thing. They both look in their own ways at different ways that they can game the system. And AJ is like, hey, didn't I hear, don't I remember somebody said I had ADD? I can have unlimited time to take the SAT so I can get into college.
It's weird because again, to our fans watching, you don't have children, to see two children raised in the exact same house, to take on traits from both parents, but they're the exact opposite. You look at Meadow. Meadow seems to be driven. She seems to be hardworking. She seems to be, and I say seems because, again, she's human. She's got her things going on. She makes her mistakes. She tried speed or X, whichever one it was. Either way. And then, but again, still a product of both parents.
Mm-hmm.
AJ, product of both parents. He's just glorifying the negative traits, and being a kid, he's going to get away with what he can get away with. They never correct his negative behavior. So it's only going to get worse.
Right.
I mean, you look back, and she even talks about this at one point. I don't know if it's in this episode. He was my little boy. He was
right.
fun loving. He would, he would help you around the house. What happened? He despises me now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and that stinks. It's like, I don't know. I feel like at this point, I don't want to say that it's too late, but he knows the system.
Oh, absolutely he does. And you think back on the first season, I mean, we laugh so much about it with he and Livia when he gets, you're gonna go visit your grandmother and all that. Even the little pranks and the different things that he does and gets in trouble. He doesn't know why it wouldn't be, if you might want to just keep the seeing the therapist part just, in your pocket. And the same guy who comes home and Father Phil has been there all night. Now, nothing has happened. We find out like he just fell asleep, that there was all that stuff there. We've been over that. AJ then would have never thought anything about it. Oh, Father Phil's here. Oh, that's cool, I guess. I'm just going to go play my video games and like that. Now you see it with that. He'd have used that. He'd have used his father being in therapy to, again, game the system. Oh, I'm getting an Xterra out of this because it's not really my fault. And I'll tell her what I really think about her. And then he's like, oh, well, that's who's going to have your keys, AJ.
Yep.
Dr. Melfi finds that Tony has left a basket of expensive toiletries and a bathrobe in her office waiting room. Later, she reads the gift card to her own therapist, Dr. Elliot Kupferberg, which contains an apology from Tony for calling her a cunt. Kupferberg tells her it represents ablution. I've done my part. I'm absolved, and all of that. At the card game, Feach continues making jokes and anecdotes, generating uproarious laughter from Tony's crew and annoying Tony himself. Now who's not laughing?
Right. Seriously.
To test Carmela's suggestion, Tony makes a primitive joke to the card player to see that if they laugh, which they do. So it's in his head. It's in his head.
A boring 747.
The following day, AJ asks his mother if he can attend a Mudvayne concert in New York with a few friends. Carmela refuses because AJ and his friends are planning on staying overnight at a hotel. Angered, AJ gives her the silent treatment. Carmela gives in on the condition that he go to Meadows' apartment after the concert and return home the following morning. AJ agrees. On the night of the concert, AJ calls Meadow to tell her that he will not be coming to her apartment afterward. She reluctantly tells him that she will cover for him if his mother calls her. At the hotel, AJ and his friends get drunk and high. The next morning, AJ and his friend Matt both wake up when a word Carmelo rings his cell phone. AJ doesn't answer it. His face is crazy glued to the carpet.
And he doesn't have eyebrows.
And his eyebrows have been shaved off and redrawn with a permanent marker. Carmela frantically calls Tony to go look for AJ just as the boy arrives back home, rudely rebuffing her. After Tony arrives, he and Carmela notice that his eyebrows have been shaved off. In the ensuing argument, AJ manages to sell a false story about his whereabouts to Tony and make him take sides against Carmela. He can play them off of each other.
Like, that scene, I felt for Carmela, right? Because the entire time she's like, and she says it, I'm not even mad anymore. I just want him home. That's it. She wants to know that he's safe because he could be dead in a ditch.
Right.
So for him to come in and like, I'm not even like that. There are moments that you want to punch AJ in the face.
Yes.
Like, because he F you, and I'm not gonna say the curse word because I don't want us to lose, the ability to post on YouTube, but he drops it hard, like,
oh yeah,
F you, and storms upstairs. She hurts herself going after him, right? So when Tony comes over and he sees her nursing her leg, he's like, "What's wrong with you?" And she says, "He cursed at me." And somehow, even with that, AJ is still able to manipulate the situation to get Tony to where he is kind of not necessarily on AJ's side, but definitely not on the side of Carmela.
Right.
And he's like, "I tried to tell you." No, the hell you didn't.
Right.
No, you didn't. But Carmela being who she is and knowing that you cannot, because, and Meadow, props to her, you're the firstborn son. You are the son. You are protected. Carmela knows that. There's no amount of arguing with Tony that is going to change the way that he feels about his boy.
Right.
And it's just, yeah. It's an interesting dynamic because, again, AJ deserves to be socked right in the jaw.
So I feel like she does a good thing here. When Tony sends AJ outside, Carmela admits that she may be at fault for AJ's actions and suggests that he should take AJ to live with him. At Tony's, AJ bonds with Tony B, and Artie as they watch TV. However, Tony eventually sends him off to do his homework.
In a minute.
Right. When Feach's hired guns carjack the attendees of a wedding for the daughter of Tony's close friend, Dr. Ira Freed, and sell the vehicles to Johnny's men, Tony recalls the joke he told at the card game and realized the only person not laughing was Feach. Concerned about a repeat of his situation with Richie, Tony reluctantly decides that Feach, although well-liked and respected, has to be dealt with. However, Tony is unwilling to kill him. Christopher and Benny visit Feach in his home and trick him into hiding a truckload of flat-screen TVs. Feach agrees for the cost of $2,000 in one of the TVs. The following day, Feach is surprised when a substitute parole officer visits him for an unscheduled inspection. He asks about the flat screen in Feach's living room, then asks to see his garage. Feach has no choice but to comply. For violating his parole by stolen merchandise, Feach is immediately returned to prison and looks forlornly at the last glimpses of the outside world. So, more than one way to deal with somebody.
Oh, it definitely is. And I don't know if Feach will ever know that he was set up, but that was the absolute best way that Tony could do that and still feel good about himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly we've seen Tony himself kill people. We've seen Tony give the order to kill people. But I'm not going to go that route. Let's just have him set up. He'll go to jail. That's on him.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, because he made the choice to keep the truck there.
Right.
Right. So but again, it's Tony doing, because he did not want to have what happened with Richie. And I get it. He got lucky with Richie.
Mm-hmm.
Because had Janice not killed Richie, there's no telling what kind of situation would have boiled over there. Because Richie was asking for permission to go after Tony. So,
Yep.
yeah. Handle this now before it becomes a bigger problem. 100%.
Over lunch, Carmela discusses AJ's troubles as well as her own with Wegler. He recommends that she reads the novel Madame Bovary, noting parallel between Carmela and the book's protagonist. Carmela has a flashback of the time when AJ careened down the driveway and out into the street on his big wheel. She frantically screams Anthony, snapping back to the present. She turns and opens the door and enters. She stands in the foyer, groceries still in arm, alone in the big house with Meadow, Tony, and now AJ gone.
That's that. So now we're asking questions like, what have you been doing? You've sacrificed who you are and who you could have been in your younger years to build this family up. And now you've got this beautiful home that you, again, have made sacrifices, turned a blind eye to some of the stuff that Tony's done. You've allowed the Gumars, et cetera, whatever. And now you've got this beautiful home and no one to enjoy it with.
Right. So that sets us up for Irregular Around the Margins, the 5th episode of season 5, 57th overall episode of the series, written by Robin Green and Mitchell Burgess and directed by Alan Coulter, originally aired on April 4th, 2004. Tony goes to the hospital to remove a mole that is later determined to be a squamous skin cancer. Adriana also goes to a doctor for irritable bowel syndrome brought on by the stress of her working as an FBI informant.
Mm-hmm.
Tony spends more time at Adriana's club, and with Christopher out of town on a cigarette smuggling job, is alone with her in her office. The two bond over recent problems and snort cocaine together. During a game of darts, the two have a sexually tense moment that is interrupted when Phil and Joey arrive for a meeting. Tony tells Dr. Melfi that Adriana is the kind of woman with whom he could start a new family, but he is aware of how that would lead to problems with both Chris and Carmela. Again, you think?
Right.
Melfi commends Tony for his milestone of resisting temptations and expressing empathy. Meanwhile, while being pressured by Agent Sasvarino to report where Chris went, Adriana discusses her feelings for Tony. Sansvarino appears understanding, but mocks Adriana's feelings to her colleague behind her back.
But he listens to me.
Right. Because I feel like that's a lot of just human nature. You want somebody to listen to you and to understand and empathize with you, not realizing that this person's listening to you and empathizing because you have something that they need.
Right.
One night on the eve of Chris's return, Tony and Adriana decide to drive to Dover to get some cocaine from her drug dealer. Tony is distracted and swerves to avoid a raccoon, which flips his SUV on the driver's side. Tony is later released from the hospital after getting a clean bill of health. Adriana, however, gets several bruises and a head injury. Tony suggests that they come up with a cover story as to why they were alone together. A horrible cover story. In the early morning, Chris learns of the accident from his crew and is puzzled aloud about why Tony and Adriana would be driving together, assuming the worst. They also imply that she was performing a sexual act on Tony at the time of the accident, given the nature of the injuries. Chris angrily interrogates her and refuses to believe her cover story about getting something to eat. I feel like she could have said, you know what? We were both stressed out. We were going to go get cocaine from my drug dealer. He wouldn't believe that either.
Well, but the thing about it is he knew who was in Dover. He even said it whenever he confronted her. It's like, I know your old dealer is in Dover.
Right.
But you've lied to me already. Beat the shit out of her and then threw her out of the house by her hair. Like, that was a very visceral scene. So if you don't like seeing domestic violence, that's a really hard scene to watch because he beat her up like something serious. But you're right. She was doomed from jump, and the montage that preceded that with all the family talking about, hey, So I heard whenever they found him, it was still in her mouth. And I'm just like, what? Like, these people, this is your boss that you're talking about. This is one of your compadres' fiance that you're talking about. They don't care, and it's just that because what happens is, societally, it's like women are perceived as the gossipers.
Right.
But what we know from this show, men gossip just as much.
Just as much, if not more. Now,
Right.
if it's Joey, I realize that this is just an entertainment program, folks. But if this is Joey in that world, and I'm stopping by for some gabagool, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would have leaned in and said, "Hey, fellas, it is good to see each and every one of you. I hope that you are doing well and prosperous, and your family are as well." I'd nix this conversation because you remember how that ended up with Ralphie with Johnny Sack's wife. Now look
Yep.
to your left and look to your right. Do you see Ralphie anywhere? That's all I'm going to say.
That's it.
I don't care if you're the one that found them, if that was happening and it was still in her mouth. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. That's just Joey.
And you would not be wrong for taking that approach, man. Like, really. And it's funny because obviously we see later on how they chose to address getting everybody back on the same page. And shouts out to Carmelo. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But why wouldn't Tony have just addressed it? Hey, everybody, sitting at the Bing or sitting at South. Hey, everybody, nothing happened.
Right.
I don't know that he ever definitively says that in a way that shuts everybody down. So because he doesn't, that gives everybody room for speculation because they know, and using the terminology in the show, Tony is a coos hound.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Chris. This is what Chris.
Is what Chris
says to him.
says. Yes.
Everybody knows since your separation, you would do anything. You would stick your Johnson in a meat cleaver if it looked at you funny. Like, come on, bro. Like this was a very emotional moment for Chris because look, and again, the hypocrisy of it, right? All these
Right.
guys have Gumars. Chris has a Gumar, but
But
don't mess with home.
right. But that's how I think they all in some way look at it like Carmela does it. I just look at it as a form of masturbation.
Right.
That's just the way things are. But don't bring it, like you said, don't bring it in here like you're pooping where you eat. You
Yeah.
don't do that. I clean that up a little bit. You get what I'm saying, though, right?
I know exactly what you're saying.
All right. So at the bada bing, Tony gives the same cover story and deflects the conversation with Chris's supposed selflessness and wrongful suspicion. Tony tells him that he should feel lucky having Adriana and swears on his children that nothing is going on. Meanwhile, this is what we're talking about. Tony's crew plays an unintentional game of telephone with the story of the accident. The details get more elaborate and lurid with each retelling. The FBI gets wind of the story and believes the distorted version of an affair. Chris, now a laughingstock, goes to Satriel's and gets angry when Vito and his crew refuse to divulge what they are laughing about. A fight nearly breaks out when Chris throws his sandwich at Vito. Poor Vito. I mean, in this instance, I'm like,
No poor Vito, bro. No poor Vito, bro. Like Vito, you want to feel for Vito, but you also got to remember, hey man, I had a chance too. But hey, when Chris was in rehab,
yep.
she wouldn't stop calling me. That's the way he plays it.
You're right.
So it's like Vito kind of got what was due.
Right. But
to
what we
him.
know, but what we already know about Vito, he has to say stuff like that. She wouldn't stop. Yeah. That I just meant with the sandwich. Maybe I felt more for the sandwich. Like, don't do that.
You felt because it was a perfectly good sandwich. It was
That's
a
what it
capicola
is. And
sandwich,
not
and it
necessarily.
was
Not necessarily Vito. Later, Chris, having heard the distorted version about the accident being caused by Adriana performing fellatio on Tony, comes home and chokes her. Adriana admits that she and Tony were going to see her drug dealer, but insists that nothing happened between them. Chris throws her out of the apartment and relapses. Later, Tony B warns Tony that Chris was overheard drunkenly complaining about the situation. Now, she tells him the truth. This is absolutely what happened, and he doesn't believe the truth because of the story that has gone on. When Tony brings AJ over to his house, Carmela confronts him about the rumors. A drunk Chris arrives at the Bing and empties his pistol into an SUV resembling Tony's before confronting Tony himself inside. Tony and his crew take Chris to a deserted road where Tony prepares to execute him if he won't accept that nothing happened with Adriana. Paulie tries to intervene on Chris's behalf, which only incites Chris further. Yeah, I wouldn't want Paulie, I'm going to take up for Chris. No, Paulie, don't say anything.
Of all the people, Paulie, you were smelling her draws, Paulie. Of all the people, you shouldn't say nothing.
Nothing. Just probably shouldn't even gone. You know what? I'll stay here. I got to take care of that SUV that he shot up anyway.
And that's the thing, right? So at first, Paulie is defending Chris. Right. But then Paulie later says, he's like, he knew there were no bullets in there. You saw what he did to the SUV. Like, bro. Like, Paulie's like, he's playing both sides there, man. And Tony B, shouts out to Tony B, looking like a guy from Boardwalk Empire. He does a phenomenal job of de-escalating the situation to save Christopher's life, because Tony said, you're making me do this.
Right.
I have no choice now because you came at me, and if I don't, well, now people are going to look at me like I'm a guy that you can come off on. Like it's a very, very, very unique situation. But you didn't, obviously we got a lot of stuff here that's going on, so we can't talk about everything. But I think that scene leading into that, before the SUV gets shot up, when Tony takes Anthony Jr. back home, this is now the first time that he's seen Carmela since the accident.
Right.
And Carmela says, you don't care about how I'm doing. You want to know if I've heard the rumors about you and Adriana, and then, so that that is a very charged scene. If they didn't get Emmy consideration for that scene, like, that was very, very tense, so props to Edie and James for doing a great job with that one.
At Tony B's suggestion, Chris is taken to the doctor who treated Tony and Adriana on the night of the accident. The doctor is pressured into confirming that Adriana was wearing her seatbelt and sitting upright, and therefore could not have been involved with Tony at the time of the crash. Chris is placated, but remains upset that everyone else thinks that the false story is true and will still treat him like a fool. Tony relates the story to a bemused Melfi. Tony convinces Carmela that nothing happened with Adriana, but is caught in a lie that he didn't do drugs. Tony tries to shift the blame by making veiled reference to Carmela's past relationships with Furio and Father Phil. San Severino continues pressuring Adriana, but is shocked when she sees her battered face. San Severino, believing that the distorted stories of Adriana and Tony, wants Adriana to use her relationship to get information, or else the FBI will plant listening devices in her club. Adriana verbally explodes on San Severino and moves to get out of the car. San Severino says that this is a syndrome to protect one's batterer, to which Adriana backhandedly defends Chris by saying that if it were him alone in the car with a woman, she would have killed him. In a show of supposed solidarity, Tony, Carmela, Chris, Adriana, Tony B, and Quintina Blundetto arrive to dine at Vesuvio, where most of Tony's crew is eating at other tables. Vito approaches them and shakes Chris's hand, wishing him a pleasant evening, and it seems that all fences had been mended.
And to you, and to you. And to you. Like it's these half-handed, nods of approval, like, oh, I see y'all are all on the same page. Maybe that stuff was untrue. Nah, like, let's not forget all y'all were just spreading horrible rumors. I will say it's over a couple days, but for us, it's a scene ago. So it's like y'all were just
Right.
saying all this stuff. Don't give me the nod of approval, man. I don't need that. I don't need Paulie and Seal to sit there because Seal's a little hunched. He's like he still has no neck.
Right.
Which is why I realize now his killing method is always to go for the neck because you can't get him back. So I mean, he's hunched over. He does the thing. So yeah, it's great scene. Shouts to Carmela for doing it. She even says it. I have to save you. You're
Right.
out here making a mockery of our family, going to clubs where he ran into, you run into your daughter high on drugs out at this club. This is coming back to the family now. You got to hide your son because you think he's going to get caught up in the crossfire, and I
Right.
have to save you.
You.
That's hilarious.
Heavy episode. The next one, not as heavy, but sets up so much stuff for the latter half of the 5th season and beyond. Sentimental Education, the 6th episode of season 5, the 58th overall episode of the series, written by Matt Weiner and directed by Peter Bogdanovich. Originally aired on April 11th, 2004. When Tony finds it increasingly difficult to take care of AJ, the boy is sent back to Carmela, who lets him move back in on the condition that he improves his grades and behavior. Carmela visits Mr. Wegler and finds herself agreeing to dinner with him. The following evening, after eating at a fine Italian restaurant, the two kiss in his car. Carmela feels guilty and goes to Father Phil, who advises her not to act on her feelings since she is still married to Tony. Carmela sleeps with Wegler anyway and spends the night at his house. Despite confessing to Father Phil, Carmela continues the affair. After a date, she says that she can't sleep with Wegler for AJ's sake, abruptly leaving his house. The next day, Wegler pressures one of AJ's teachers to raise his grade for a poorly written essay.
So, again, because I'm not trying to have myself nor this show canceled, anyone who, loves Catholicism and Father Intentola, don't take offense at what I'm about to say, okay? But this episode showed Father Phil as a salty bitch. Like, he's sitting there looking like he's passing judgment on Carmela when Wegler is essentially filling the role that she had for Father Phil in the beginning. She even says, he reminds me, I thought he was a homosexual. He actually reminds me a lot of you. Like, he says this to Father Phil. And he's just looking at her, kind of looking down a little bit. Like, he almost is looking down on her, passing judgment. If we're going to have this conversation, I think that we should have Tony here as well. What? You and I know what Tony does. Everybody knows what Tony does. You're not saying that he needs to stop, but you're going to tell me that I'm wrong for what I'm doing. Like, that situation for Carmela had to feel hard because, again, she even says this to Wegler, I have not been with anyone besides my husband.
Right.
That's it. So now she's getting ready to consider going intimate with a man outside of her marriage who she's never done with, something she's never done before. Whereas on the other side of that card is a husband who will diddle anything. And yet has the audacity to throw her flirting in her face. Like, it's crazy.
Because I think that she threw that at Father Phil back a few seasons before, like, oh, you get off on this, and and you know, it's not a physical thing with him, it's more mental and emotional.
Dude.
She called him out, and people don't like to be called out. So Father Phil got out his "I'm gonna be petty" notebook, made note of it, stuck it in his back pocket, and he goes. So then she comes in. He goes, "Well, will you look at what I found here?" He flipped it out. That's why he was salty. He knew what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely. He did his best Ryan Howard impression. You know, he's made the list.
Not even looking.
Just wrote the name down. Was like, this is gonna come in handy later. And boom, like right as soon as it happened, immediately drops that bomb on her. But kudos to her for having that moment, you know. But Carmela's not dumb. She knows that, you know, her vagina is platinum, and she was able to use said affections to get her son's grade raised. I couldn't dare think about being intimate when my son is failing, you know, and then all of a sudden regular goes, strong arms the professor. But that professor also showed his bias as well. You know, what does it mean to the kid who busts their butt when, you know, Corleone Jr. or whatever he wanted to call him gets his grade bumped up just because you asked for it? You know what I mean? It's like that. Again, powerful scenes, man.
After several rounds of sex, followed by Carmela talking about AJ, Wegler comes to the conclusion that she's just using him to get her son better grades and wants to end the relationship. Carmela is hurt by this, and after an argument, threatens Wegler before storming out. When her father visits the house and finds her despondent, he suggests that she look for other men. Carmela replies that her status as Tony's wife will always cause other people to assume that she is seeking to gain some benefits.
And so I can see both sides, right? If you're Carmela, you're a mother first, so you want to make sure that your son is taken care of, and I absolutely understand that. You have the opportunity to use your influence over this man to assist your son. I get that. I can understand why she would think that no, her turning him down that night when she, you know, and then offering it up to him the next day, that's not bad. That's just she was tormented at that moment. Now she's not tormented. Now she's feeling it. Right. But I can also see Wegler's side as well to say, I got blue balls on Tuesday night because you didn't want to give me anything, and then I go and I strong arm this guy, and now you're all over me. I can see that as well.
Right.
Both of them are right in their perception.
Sure.
You know, so what do you do with that information, you know?
And she comes to the conclusion, not that she hadn't already, it's just once again brought up to her. You're not Carmela. You're Tony Soprano's wife. Tony B tries to adjust to civilian life, but it's at odds with his employer, Kim. With the help of his girlfriend, Gwen, Tony B passes his state massage board exam and is hopeful to open his own business. Kim offers to partner up with Tony B, as he happens to have an empty storefront in West Caldwell. Later, Tony B comes across a bag containing $12,000, which had been abandoned by fleeing drug dealers. Despite having a streak of good luck, Tony B goes on a self-destructive tear and wastes most of the money on gambling and expensive clothes. After fighting on the phone with Gwen, he mocks Kim's English pronunciations and beats him up. While eating with Tony at Vesuvio, Tony B hints that he screwed up and asks if he still needs someone to cover the airbag scheme. It's hard doing business with strangers, respond Tony, smiling.
Because Tony wanted to be the person. Tony wanted to be the guy that saved him. But yeah, again, even there was a lot there, you know, that we didn't get to see. I mean, you're talking Tony B having the truck getting stolen and, you know, skinning up his legs really bad. You know, so Kim accuses him of, you know, doing some foul stuff and shows him the gun. Like, that is a threat, bro. I don't care where you live. Like, that is a straight up threat on life. So he shows him the gun. If I don't need Tony Soprano, I wouldn't hire you, but then, the police give him the report, and then he passes the exam. So Kim's a businessman. Let's go
Right.
into business. And I feel like, in all honesty, that could have been great for Tony B, because I feel like Kim was going to give him the anonymity to do what he needed to do. He was going to let him run it way more than Tony would have, because Tony
Right.
would have leached the crap out of that place, just like they did with the other businesses in the past. But I felt because that was a very short arc. You've been in jail all this time. You come out and you do not want to go back because you've developed this passion for something. And now, because life has just crapped on you in the appropriate way, you get some fast cash, 12 grand at one time. You're like, yo, I like this fast money. So let's just screw this civilian living and let's go and do what we do. It's hard working with strangers. Get out of here, Tony. Get out of here, man. Tony, Uncle Johnny, get out of here, buddy.
Right. And it's one of those things where Tony B's one of these guys, and a lot of us are. I have been before in my life. You get some good things going. Oh, I can't have that because I can't have anything to complain about when life is screwing up. So you screw up yourself. I mean, admittedly, I've been there.
And I too have been there, and it's very humbling. And again, I oftentimes will praise strong acting and strong writing, because that is what is needed for a show of this magnitude. But when you're able to see yourself, because you said it, nobody likes to be called out. But when you're able to see it done that way, yes, not everybody is self-destructive, but there are some of us who are self-destructive, and that's exactly what Tony B was at that moment. He was extremely self-destructive because he had the money, and what money does, they say money is the root of all evil. No, the evil is in us. Money provides opportunity, but we don't have to act on it.
Right.
And that's the lesson that Tony B had to learn the hard way, man. It's like, I just got 12 grand. I'm going to do some stuff for the kids, but ultimately I'm gambling. I'm dealing with whores, and I don't mean anything about whores. I just wanted to say it because I love the way that they say whores.
Right.
Like, I love it, right? So it's just, man, you feel for Tony B. You feel for Tony B because he's in the shadow of his other cousin, and he doesn't even know why Tony does what he does for him. He assumes it's out of love. And teaser, everybody, it's not.
It is not. But that's where we're going to leave it off this time. TJ, as always, it's a pleasure doing this with you. We're going to break down some more, getting towards the end of season 5, setting up some big things for season 6.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get to that next time. Thank you so much for everyone. Hoping to be put these out more often from here on out, so we get
We're back, baby.
Yeah, we're getting back in
we're
a regular schedule. Thank you all so much. We will see you next time.